Good afternoon and welcome to my humble model railway, Bedstead Junction. It's a Sunday afternoon and it's about 20 to 4. I'm going to be looking at as many trains as I can. What we're going to be hoping to pack in is into the programme today are engines by Churchward, by Collett and by Hawksworth. The last three chief mechanical engineers of the Great Western Railway. So without any further ado, we're going to be looking at a county class. Now also we're going to be able to compare two of the county classes which were on the Great Western Railway. Now I'm just going to get the camera adjusted here a second. Now we're on a gorilla pod today, so again, so we get on with a gorilla pod as opposed to a full-size tripod. And there's the county come around now. Now there are two types of county produced for the Great Western Railway. Three if you include the county tanks. But this is a county class locomotive. Now this one is County of Devon, and it's a 440 designed by George Jackson Churchward. George Jackson Churchward was the chief mechanical engineer of the Great Western Railway from 1902 to 1922, so we had 20 years in the job. Now basically what these are in reality are a shrunken down Saint. There was a need to produce a locomotive suitable for more lightly laid railway lines where the weight limit was more strict and where 460s were not allowed. And that's why these 440s were designed. But basically, they're exactly that, they're a shrunken down Saint. Now the idea behind that being that they can use as many common parts as possible, and that was in an effort to standardise the locomotives on the Great Western Railway. Now the first one was produced in 1904, and I think there were 30 built in total if I remember rightly. Some of these were even named after Irish counties, and that's because at the time the Great Western Railway was trying to promote a journey from Paddington into the what is now the Republic of Ireland. I mean, back in 1904, the actual Republic of Ireland had not come into being yet, and in fact the whole of the island of Ireland was all part of the United Kingdom. Okay, but the Great Western Railway wanted to promote their trip. I think they went to Fishguard and then crossed to Rosslare in Ireland, and then down south through the Irish railways. And that's why a number of these county class locomotives were actually named after counties like County Kerry. They proved to be very, very capable locomotives, but they developed a reputation for rough riding. Now the reason for that is because the front end of the locomotive is that of a Saint, and they had to balance the moving forces between 4 driving wheels instead of through 6. So there was quite severe pounding on the track compared to other locomotives. Certainly compared to the inside cylindered 440s or the 460s, but they did gain a reputation as being capable locomotives. They were all scrapped by about 1933. There was one of the reasons for that, of course, was that Churchward was succeeded by Collett in 1922, and Collett was obviously wanted to produce his own designs of locomotives. And there were a lot of locomotives suitable for the same job being produced, like the Manors and the Granges and the Halls. Okay, so certainly with the coming of the Manor class, there would have been not so much need for these 440s. And I think probably it's possible, I mean I can't say this for certain, but maybe that may be some of the parts that were from these locomotives, because they shared common parts with the Saint class. They may have been used to keep the Saint classes going. In fact the Saints were in use until 1953. Now, the locomotive you see go around is in the Great Western livery, and it's got it's lined, and it's a Hornby model, and it's one of the Hornby Railroad range, which means that the model is slightly less detailed than the usual sort of full fat models from Hornby. Some of the compromises they've made on this particular model is that it's got the a moulded on dart on the front of the smoke box. The lining isn't quite elaborate, and also the cab is black. None of the actual details in the cab are actually picked out. But we'll see if we can have a look at the cab at some stage as well. Okay, now this is going to be the county class going round now then. I'm going to bring her in. Remember, this is a 440. I'll be looking at another type of county later on as well. In fact, what we'll do is we'll bring the two together and we'll compare them. Okay, so what we're going to do is let her do one more lap. We'll just stop her with the signal up there. Very nice runners, these Hornby Railroad counties, 440 counties, and you'll see how it goes over points as well. It's got pickups in the tender as well as on the locomotive. The locomotive does have traction tyres as well, which gives it really good grip on the rails and gives it good pulling power. So we're just going to bring her into the station now. We might go handheld to watch her come in. So we'll just bring the locomotive forward. I'll watch her going elegantly over the points. And then we'll just bring the tripod round and watch her come into the station. There we are. And the other locomotive you can see beyond it, the larger locomotive, is also a county. Okay, and this is the later counties, and it was designed by Frederick William Hawksworth, who became Chief Mechanical Engineer of the Great Western Railway in 1941. So he was in fact the very last Chief Mechanical Engineer of the Great Western Railway before the Great Western Railway become a part of the nationalised railway network. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have a change of points. I'm staying handheld for a while with this particular camera, so excuse any jolting. We're going to have a quick change of points. And you can see up here what we've got here points wise. Okay, we're changing the points there for the line containing the county. Before we go, we'll have a look at the points. Sorry, at the coaches. I get my words muddled up today. You've got behind the actual earlier county, you've got the Dean Clarity coaches, which have got the actual set of windows at the top because they were gas lit, and then beyond it are some Hornby Collett coaches. You can see the difference in the roof line. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to bring this Hawksworth County out of the station. Again, like I say, it's another Hornby locomotive. That's lovely. So we're just going to pop the tripod back down now with the camera. Okay, and then we can watch this locomotive go around the track. Just going to move the tripod away from the side of the track. And here we are. Okay, so let's see now. Now the Hawksworth counties were the last 460s built for the Great Western Railway. They were a twin cylinder locomotive, so they carried on very much in the tradition of the Saints, the Halls and the Granges. This one differed in design from the earlier county as well, in that this particular one was fitted with a double chimney. Now these gained a good reputation for their power. In fact, the tractive effort of one of these, even though it was a twin cylinder locomotive, was should have been comparable to a castle. Now one of the reasons why the locomotive was designed the way it was is because it was designed and produced in wartime. Okay, so they were produced towards the end of the war. I think they were made between 1945 and 1947, but in those approximate years. They were built towards the end of World War II, and again I think they amounted to 30 locomotives. They were used in Cornwall a lot of the time. This one is actually named after a Welsh county, and this one's County of Monmouth. Now what we're going to do, we're going to have a little look at the instructions for this particular locomotive. Just let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here we are. Well, this would tell us something about this particular locomotive as a model, okay? It's our 2211, and it came out, I think I should say, in March of 2001. So it's nearly 2,000 locomotives. Many people say that that was one of the best times for Hornby models to be produced, okay? Now it's got something called a Type H wingfoot motor. And that's what a Type 8 wingfoot motor looks like. So you can actually, it's got interchangeable brushes and springs, and instead of having the motor in the tender as in earlier locomotives, this one is actually put inside the locomotive itself. You see where the motor normally goes there, inside a kind of a case in there. Okay, so that, and in fact I think a lot of the parts were interchangeable between the castle and the county at that time. Now we'll have a look over both models. I'm going to bring this one in to the side of the track in just a moment. We'll have a quick look at her. You see she's a very good runner, running around the track there. We'll see if we can bring her into a place where she'll be easy to see. I think it should give us a good view. I'm going to go handheld, so excuse any wobbliness. The Hawksworth County of Monmouth, okay? Now the difference between this one is that it's got a straight nameplate, okay, as opposed to County of Devon, it's got the curved nameplate over the splasher there. Well, they bear this a family resemblance of having the copper chimney, brass safety valve covers and whistles. This one differs, obviously it's got the double chimney, safety valve cover and the whistles. Again, the difference as well is in the cabs. I mean, this one's got a side window in the cab, whereas the Churchward engine does not. In fact, you can see it's got the C-shaped cutouts there. And this one will be in Great Western livery, because none of these 440s actually survived into British Railway ownership. As we said before, they were all scrapped by around about 1933. Okay, along with the sister county tanks, which I think were replaced by the large prairies. Now we're coming back to our one here. You can see this is in British Rail livery. You can see the Lates crest there. Move along the locomotive. You can clearly see it's a 4 a 460. Okay, so excuse any wobbliness there, my handheld efforts. Okay, so we're going to bring the tripod round now. Back to the table. I'm going to bring it around again for a little bit. I'm just going to adjust the tripod again. Raise things up just slightly. There we are. Okay, and then we're just going to bring County of Monmouth around the track again. Like I say, this the 440 County, as I said before, is in the railroad range, whereas this one, I don't think the railroad range had come out in 2001. Let me correct if I'm wrong there. You can see the locomotive now heading down the track, and with both of these, I mean, they both had maybe shorter lives than they should have done. Coming out in 1940, they both had a lifespan really on the tracks of the Great Western for about 20 years each. I mean, 1904 to 1934, so that was a span of 33, so a span of 25 years, isn't it? And these went from about 1945 to about 1965. In fact, 1965 was the intended time for steam to be eliminated on the western region of British Rail. And a lot of these locomotives were actually beginning to be scrapped in about 1962, I think. Certainly the Kings had gone by 1962. None of these were preserved. And again, sadly, none of the 440 counters were preserved either. So none of these escaped the cutter's torch, unfortunately. Now, as a model, I think it's a very, very nice model. I mean, again, it's got a moulded on dart on the smoke box, but it is nicely detailed. It doesn't have the painted cab, the same as more modern offerings, but it was relatively inexpensive. Just slow down a little bit there. And we're slower down now. I think I've got a bit of a slight problem with my track. Yeah, I've got a loose fish plate, so the track's coming apart now. I'll have to fix that later on. As you know, with this layout, it doesn't go out permanently. It goes back at the end of every running session. Now, Hawksworth actually retired, I think, after the Great Western Railway was amalgamated into the British Rail. In fact, the Great Western became the Western region of British Rail. And then there were further steam locomotives later designed by people like Robert Riddles, who brought in the standard locomotives, like all the standard classes, which came after 1950. Now, both counties gave good service on the Great Western Railway, and in fact the 440 counties very often I believe had to deputise for more powerful locomotives, and they did quite well on that, and these were quite capable of pulling expresses or freight trains. Some people said they were a little bit difficult to control on the regulator. Obviously, having never driven one of these or driven a train myself, to be truthful, I couldn't really tell you about that. I'm going to tell you something else as well. I'm going to slow her down a little bit now. I'm going to bring her in, okay? Because I want to show you something about how these two locomotives differ. And this is what happens between a tender-driven locomotive and one with the actual motors built inside the loco itself. Okay, what we're going to do is just going to change the points and bring it back in. Now let's take a look. In she comes. Over the points. Around the curve. And then we'll try to watch her come in, and I'll try to do the regulator as well. Quite a feat of right-to-hand coordination this. I'm holding the tripod with the left hand. I can bring it back just ever so slightly so you don't foul the main running line. There we are, that should do it. Now, these railroad locomotives, the 440s, were originally tender driven. Okay, they're loco driven now, so but they kept the rather exaggerated coal out there. You can see it's piled up rather high, and that was pointing my finger now. That was to accommodate the Ringford motor that used to be in the tender driven locomotives. Okay, but this one, because it was designed as a loco driven from the outset, you can see it's not even got a full load of coal. You know, if you can see from above. Let's have a look. We're going handheld, of course. There you can see there the coal goes down quite a long way into the tender, and also we'll have a rare bird's eye view of each locomotive. Sorry about the strap getting in the way there. I always wear a strap on my cameras. There we are, so the bird's eye view there. And there's a bird's eye view of the later county. Obviously the county is being a larger locomotive because it's a 460. And we're going to set the points now so we can see a different locomotive. Just checking the points. And again, gliding out of the station, you can see across there. It's a prairie tank locomotive. That's what they call a small prairie. Designed for branch line use, they could be used for both passengers and freight. We're just going to adjust the camera slightly again. That's it. So this camera's got a spirit level on it, so we're trying to keep the camera level if we can. Let's just bring it around. Now this locomotive differs from the others which are on the tracks today, in that it's a locomotive by Bachmann. I'm going to watch her go through the station over there just for a change. Zoom in a little if we can. Well, I think we got that focus on reasonably well now. So let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see our small prairie going through the station now. And behind the large prairie. Let's bring the camera around now so we can hopefully focus on her coming round. And this is the 4575 class of locomotive. Designed by Charles Benjamin Collins. It was based on the 4500 class, and it differed from the 4500 class by having a higher water capacity. Now you can tell these, pardon me, because they'll have sloping tops on the water tanks. The water tanks are placed on each side of the boiler. Okay. They were 61 tons in weight, and 100 of these were built at Swindon Works. They were designed for branch line operation, and the last 4 of these locomotives were withdrawn in December 1964. And of these tank engines, 11 have survived into preservation. So a very, very popular engine for preserved railways. In fact, a lot of these will be of an ideal size. I mean, a lot of the preserved railways of today are branch lines, or they're for very short journeys. Something like this class of locomotive will be ideal on a preserved railway. You can imagine maybe one of these larger locomotives, maybe putting into somewhere like Taunton Station, and then there was a branch line from Taunton to Minehead, which exists today as the West Somerset Railway. But you cannot get a train from Taunton to Minehead directly, not now. You need to start off at Bishop Lydiard. There is a railway line going into Taunton Station, but I think that at the moment there's prohibitive costs regarding setting that up. But you can do it by public transport. In fact, you can get buses from Taunton train station to Bishop Lydiard, and then take the West Somerset Railway. In fact, I've had a many happy afternoon on the West Somerset Railway being pulled by locomotives such as these. Okay, so that's your Small Prairie, the 4575 class, and it's pulling 2 Bachmann coaches, which are, well, they're really sort of main line, but main line become replica railways, then replica railways become Bachmann. So they've basically got the sort of heritage behind them. In fact, the rearmost coach is a main line, and the frontmost coach is replica railways. But I think when you look underneath the replica railways, even though it's a replica railways box, I think it's a Bachmann underneath. So you can see that it was morphing from main line into Bachmann eventually. The Great Western coaches, call it 60-foot coaches in BR maroon, so it would be they're appropriate coaches for this particular train, which has the late BR crest on it. I'm going to bring her around and we'll have a close look at her. Very, very nice locomotives these. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to be able to find one, I mean, I think they're very well worth getting. Nicely detailed locomotives. Let's put her in, we can try and get a better look at her. We're going handheld for this. And you can see, I'm going to zoom out just slightly now, perhaps. Oh, there we are, so we can see it quite clearly now. Now you can see the sloping top to the water tanks. That gave them more water capacity as opposed to the earlier class, the 4500 class. You can again see the copper cap chimney, brass safety valve cover, and then the whistles there, and the late British Railways crest. And it being a tank engine, it doesn't have a tender on it. For those of you who are uninitiated, you've got the coal bunker on the back, you can see that with the coal. And these were obviously designed to be travelling on shorter ranges. They wouldn't carry as much water or coal as a tender powered locomotive, tender locomotive. Got a nice lining on it. I do believe it may have. Sorry about my big finger getting in the way there. Yes, it got sprung buffers on it. So that's a Bachmann locomotive. Very, very nice. Okay, so we're going to bring it around now, and then we'll be having a look at one last locomotive. Now we might run into the 30-minute limit on here, but I think it's worth me carrying on filming, so I may have to stop the camera and then resume filming. So there might be a slight break in continuity, but I think it's worth it to bring on the last locomotive into view, and we can talk about it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the points. I'm going to watch this one go into the station. You can see the station there and the junction for it. Okay, so in we go. You'll see her come into view in a moment. See if she goes. See how she goes over the junction. Yeah, over the junction quite well. I'll slow her down a bit. There we go. And these mainline coaches can be temperamental on points, but they've gone over them all right now, as long as you do it slowly enough. Sorry, slight loss of control there. Okay, we'll leave it parked up there now. I do believe I've had a slight rush of blood with the controller there, so we'll just try and bring it back. Sorry about that, I came off the end of the siding then. That's why I need buffers really, isn't it? Let's have a look. Oh, there we are. She's back on look. Now we reached the 30-minute limit, so we'll be splicing these two halves together of this video, or two parts. Now, we're going to be moving on to the next locomotive in just a moment. We're just going to change the points. And the next locomotive we're looking at is the Hornby Large Prairie. Okay, so let's bring them into reverse and let's watch it come out. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So we're going to be flying around this track in just a moment. The Large Prairie. Again, designed by Charles Benjamin Collett, and these would have replaced the county tanks. They were originally designed for fast suburban services on the Great Western Railway, but they could be seen all over the Great Western Railway network. And in fact, we can have proof of that in just a moment, if I can get it into focus for us. Now, the Large Prairie is obviously much more powerful locomotive, and like I say, designed for fast suburban services. They could be also seen on fast stopping services as well. Again, a tank engine, of course. They've got the now the Small Prairie and the Large Prairie. They're called Prairie because they've got a 2-6-2 wheel arrangement, two leading wheels, 6 driving wheels, and 2 trailing wheels under the cab. We'll have a look at that in a moment. Now, this is not the latest Hornby model. Now, Hornby came out with a model later to this. Okay. Now, the reason I'm sticking with this particular, the older version of this locomotive, is that I've noticed that on some reviewers have had certain problems with bits falling off the later Hornby model, and also them not performing as well as expected. Now, this one, even though it's an older model, in fact it's based on the old Airfix model, really. It's built like a tank. It's a tank engine built like a tank. It weighs a ton and pulls like a proverbial train. So, would I recommend one of these? Yes, definitely. I mean, on the actual instruction leaflet, they refer to it as a 61 XX locomotive. I do think this is from about 2016. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But then, like I say, they're based on the body-wise at least. They're based on the earlier Airfix models from the 1970s. I'll be taking a look at a photograph in a moment, hopefully not breaking any kind of copyright rules. I'll be doing a book recommendation for you along with this as well. Great Western Steam in the West Country, the Norman Lockett collection, and in fact there's a collaboration between Mark Arlett, that's a railway author, and David Lockett. I believe that's the son of Norman Lockett. Someone that took a load of pictures from the 1930s onwards on the Great Western Railway. And you can see the same class of locomotive along the seawall. Slight shadow there, but you get the picture, so to speak. So as I say, these can be seen all over the Great Western Railway network. And that's actually running along the seawall towards Parsons Tunnel. The local service bound for Exeter on the 27th of June 1958. So that backs up what I said about these being used all over the Great. Even though these were originally designed for London suburban surfaces, they could be seen all over the western region of British Rail in the end. Okay, putting to what we call it coaches. We're going to leave things there for now. Now I hope this particular video has been of interest to you. And if you like what you see, press like. I'll just adjust the tripod again. And press subscribe. And ring that bell to see more locomotives on my little modern railway layouts here. And thanks for watching. And goodbye.